You're listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal with Matthew Taub.
Hey everyone, it's Matt from Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal. I want to thank my guest today. He's an incredible person. Tuff, he's an educator, he's in recovery, he's doing so much. We're going to hear his story on where it started and how he's about to be showcased on this amazing documentary he's created. Ben, I want to thank you for coming to the show today. Rise Up. Let's just jump right into your story. Let's hear what you got.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for having me. And if someone were to tell me 11 years ago, number one, I wouldn't be drinking 11 years from now. And number two, I'd no longer be teaching, or at least teaching in the conventional sense, I'd be like, right. What? Like, no way. Like, that's my life. Both, actually, was my life. Your life. Yeah. So, you know, I guess you can always look backwards, but I've always focused on looking forwards. And that's allowed me to have a great recovery. And when I speak to schools or speak to groups of people, or, you know, anytime I have the opportunity to showcase my story and let people know what addiction is and help destigmatize addiction as best I can, they're like, you're like the happiest alcoholic I've ever met.
Because there are more of us, you know. There are more of us, but right. I think they're used to that stigma of, like, woe is me. Yeah. And I said, well, you know, I think you're getting the wrong view of alcoholism, because all the people that I hang out with are so happy to be alive, and they just want to take advantage of every second of every day. And that's what I've learned in sobriety, that every second counts, and that our own actions can have a resounding effect on those people around us. Right. Whether they are, you know, crippled by the disease of addiction, or if they're just a normal person. I think that one of the ideas behind making the film that I have coming out is that it speaks to everybody. And it's not just limited to a certain segment of the population, but it does educate a wide variety of people as to what an alcoholic, single one of me, might look like. Well, and it's funny you do that, because we talked about that the other day, you and I, where the whole purpose of this podcast is not just about addiction and recovery for those of us in recovery, but to educate everybody else on what people are like, you know, who these people are, who we are, who are in recovery, and how what we've done can translate to anybody, right? Living in that moment and savoring every single day and living the best possible day is, I think, what a lot of people, whether you're in recovery, an addict, or just not, we don't do. We don't take advantage of every moment. So that's awesome. So let's go back. Let's go back to your story. Let's start where, you know, where it began. We don't need to know, you know, grade one, but let's go back and just start where the problems started and go from there.
Well, I think that for a lot of us, we learn from an early age that alcoholism or addiction is a genetic disease, and those that are predisposed to it are highly likely to grapple with it later on in life. But the funny thing is I grew up thinking that, you know, everything around me was normal because I didn't know any different. And I was the youngest of 6 kids. We were a hard partying family, and you know, from my oldest brother all the way down, I witnessed them, you know, partying all the time around us when we were little, and there was a 10-year difference between my oldest brother and my twin brother and me. And so I automatically
when I thought about alcohol, it's sort of like those kids who have been watching too many Sunday night football games and they think that like Anheuser-Busch is like the coolest thing ever.
Right.
They grow up thinking like, wow, like that's awesome. And for me, it was okay. Like whenever my family's home and whenever we're hanging out or whenever we're going to cocktail parties or having cocktail parties, alcohol was very heavily served and consumed. And that meant having a good time. So when I turned 16, 17, it was like go time. And that was kind of late for our family. And I still knew that for me, once I started the kind of partying, drinking mentality, nothing was stopping. It was like what I looked forward to every week. It was a focus point, and that was it. And it was also an escape. You know, for me, I grew up with a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. I had numerous panic attacks growing up, usually, you know, on a monthly basis. Very high stress. And once I discovered alcohol, I was like, man, this stuff is awesome. Like, it's a very short escape, and the next day isn't great, but you know, this is something I can definitely get into. So, two things in my mind had happened. I had found out that it could calm my anxieties, and two, that it would create a festive, fun, exciting time.
Right.
And that set the stage for college when it was, I wouldn't say like I had like a crazy party life in college, but I could find groups of people partying every night to justify my own habits.
Right.
You know?
And it was college, and it was accepted, and it was what we did. Like, I know when I was in college, my roommate and I, we invited a friend of ours, parent house for dinner, and he's like, hey mom, this is Matt, this is Mike. And his mother looked at us like with confusion, and we were like, what? She goes, Matt and Mike? We're like, yes. You're not a bar? What? Every weekend, everybody from this part of the city goes downtown to Matt and Mike's, and they come back drunk, high, and smelling like smoke. So we thought it was a bar. I'm like, this is where I live. It's my apartment. So it was, and that just continued on, obviously. But it's amazing. They say we were the people you were looking for.
Yes, yes. I would have been very closely aligned to you on those. I guess the toughest nights were Sunday, Monday, trying to find some partners in crime. But I usually managed to rope someone into it and getting into some fun, but or what I thought was fun at that point. And so as I got older, I got married young, and you know, I found myself sneaking beers every now and then in the beginning, and you know, taking the dogs for a walk and having a couple in my pocket just to kind of relax and take the edge off, I would say. And that steadily progressed up until about 13, 14 years ago. And it was like, well, I can't really hide these cans very easily, but you know, it's a lot easier to hide a bottle of vodka. So I remember I always had a spare $20 bill in the back of my wallet, and I would go, and I was like, whoever created cash back at the grocery store is the smartest person ever, because I could get away with putting cash in my wallet. Then I could stop, you know, get my pint of vodka, and then I'd buy 2 vitamin waters. I'd sip them right down to the end of the label, and then I would fill it up and put them in my backpack, ready to go. And people ask me, like, why did you do it that way? Like, you know, what were you doing? And I said, well, I was tricking myself as well.
Right.
I was convincing myself that it was just vitamin water. Like, don't worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have a problem.
It was just trying to make it easier and convenient. I'm just mixing it. Yeah, there's the rationale behind everything we've done. We're good at it. You can rationalize anything.
Right.
So,
and things just kind of spiraled. The last year, so this is about 12 years ago, things just started to spiral, and I was always going through periods of really excited, happy to be here, to being depressed, down in the dumps, like didn't want to get off the couch, and I didn't think twice of it. And I was still having those panic attacks, and I found myself having a panic attack one day, and my wife took me to the hospital and said, she was like, I'm so sick of this. Like, he hasn't acted like himself. Mm-hmm. She knew that I'd been drinking some, but like not to the level that I had. And we were in like the triage little room in the hospital, and I was just starting to get really hungover, and I was like nauseous and felt awful. And the nurse comes in, and I said, "Are you going to admit me or like have me seen by the doctor?" And she said, "Well, we can't until your blood alcohol is below the legal limit."
right.
And I was like, and I looked over at my wife, and she was like, What? From the night before? Like,
Yeah.
It's 11:30. Like, what's going on? Like, this is a serious problem. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with all this. Like, I'm ready. Let's go. Come on, I'm going to rehab. I'm ready to go right now. And I quickly realized that things didn't happen that quickly.
Yeah.
And 8 days later of being in detox in the psych ward of Torrington Hospital in Connecticut was actually one of the best things for me in meeting people of different walks of life and giving me a taste of what addiction, long-term addiction, can do to you. And a lot of people get in that position. They're like, what a horrible place to be. But it's exactly what I needed. And and then I went on to Silver Hill Hospital in Connecticut, which was the best thing that's ever happened to me. And again, it was at that point that people were like, you are way too happy to be here. Like, I am so sick of hearing you talk because you're so happy. Like, the rest of us have lost things in our lives, and we're all like so happy to be sober, but we've lost too much. And you're always kind of rubbing it in our faces about how great you have it. And I said, I don't mean it that way.
Right.
That's just how I roll.
And that's, like we said today, that's part of the eye opener is that, for people come from backgrounds a little more like ours, where you go to a rehab and or a detox or hospital where you're shown so much more than we thought it was. Like, I remember I met people who relapsed on purpose so they can get a roof over their head and 3 square meals a day. Like, there I was running back and forth from rehab because so I could train my clients. Like, I'm still running a business and doing rehab and doing blood work all the time to make sure I wasn't doing anything wrong. But here's people who I'm like, wow. Like, I felt bad. Like, you opened my eyes to what was going on, and it wasn't just what I thought it was. Hanging out with the guys every day drinking. So when you went to the rehab, then where did you go? So after detox.
So I spent 5 weeks in rehab. It was actually a 28-day program, but since I lived at a boarding school, I really didn't feel comfortable going back that last week of school before graduation.
Right.
So I made the decision just to stay one extra week, keep working on me, and then segue out. And at that point, I had an awesome sponsor that I met at an open AA meeting in town. His name was Ken, and I ended up choosing him like the third day I was there because he had an Irish accent, and someone in my house told me that you need to choose someone who's going to really hold you accountable. It was one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard. And he said, when you're choosing your sponsor, you're not going for the nice guy. It's not like you're
Right.
asking a girl out on a date. You're going to go for the meanest, like most to the point guy there. Not necessarily meanest, but most serious.
Yeah,
and
hardcore. The one who's not going to let you kind of get away with
right,
anything.
right. I couldn't talk my way out of anything.
Right.
And he also happened to be an ex-marathoner and a huge triathlete. And so when I asked him to be my sponsor, I was like, do you think I could do triathlon if I've never swum before? He was like, yeah, I think it would be great for you, get you back in shape. I think that's a great goal once you leave here. So I ended up leaving Silver Hill, and I learned how to swim. And 3 months later, I did my first kind of sprint triathlon. I didn't really know how to swim in the beginning, so it was a process getting there.
So,
But
sorry, when you say you didn't know how to swim,
I mean, like, I never knew how to properly swim.
right? Like you could
I
swim, but it wasn't like you're not doing front stroke properly, front crawl properly. Like
yeah, I mean, it was like kind of. I had swim lessons as a kid in
Right.
Mississauga, you know,
Yeah.
and that was it. And when I would swim to like from point A to point B, it would be like half on my stomach, half on my back, and half on my side, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'd never done it like properly. And being the stubborn alcoholic that I am, of course, I didn't go and get any lessons or get any help that would have kind of cut out some of the extra effort that I put in. But it was great because I learned it all on my own, and I watched
Right.
a lot of YouTube videos, and I put in the time. And after 6 or 7 years in sobriety, I was doing 10, 15 triathlons a year, and was pretty competitive, and a little too competitive.
Right.
It got to the point where I was just sizing up the competition in the beginning of these races, and I just wanted to beat everybody, and I
Right.
wanted to be all American, and I wanted to be, and it's great to have lofty goals, but I found that my initial reason for getting into triathlon was to take care of myself and take care of my brain and to take care of my well-being. And now the competitiveness was getting in the way.
Right.
So I signed up for a 2-mile swim as a little bit of a trial to see if I could go that far. And I finished in the middle of the pack. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done with triathlon. I'll still, run from time to time, and I'll still bike. And my thing is going to be swimming.
Right.
And from there, it just took off.
So before we go to the next level, so let's see. When I remember when I did my recovery, and this comes up a lot, I'm sure you've heard it. Don't transfer one addiction to another. Did you ever get anybody saying to you, and I remember hearing that when I was in rehab and doing my programs, and they would say to me, don't make fitness your thing. I'm like, but it's what I do for a living. Like, what do I do? So I just don't find anything to transfer. Like, I know, don't start dating and all that stuff, somebody in rehab, all that stuff. Did anybody ever say to you, like, you're just transferring an addiction from one to the other?
Well, it was such a gradual switch that I turned
Right.
on into the athletic world. I mean, it's not like I was going hours a day. I'd work out for 45 minutes or so, a healthy amount.
Right.
And later on, when I started doing the crazy distances and I was
Yeah.
doing the crazy training for it, there was definitely the point where people were like, you traded one addiction for the other.
Right.
And I said, yes, I did. But out of this addiction, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm strictly my doctors are always looking after me and doing crazy tests and are all about making sure that I'm healthy and all that. So
Right.
I'm not hurting myself. I'm not hurting those loved ones around me like I did in addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's allowing me for a really healthy mindset. And it is the place where I feel most comfortable connecting with my higher power.
Right.
And lastly, it's the place that I can do my thinking and I can tear things down and I can process. And all those feelings and frustrations that I used to drink over, I now had the skills
Right.
to work through in my head in a quiet place.
That's amazing. And I bring that up only because take out of what you just said, the addiction part. Everything else you said. If you talk to anybody else who does long marathon, ultra marathon, all those things, nobody ever says to them if they weren't an addict, saying, aren't you transferring one? They're just, they're crazy for doing that. But we have, again, that stigma is kind of still there. That attachment is still of like, we've, as addicts, we're just transferring. So what do they want us to do? Like, if I can't go hard at anything, I was good at drinking. I gotta be good at something else. Otherwise, I've got all this free time with my own thoughts, thinking myself, and you know this, especially being an athlete and all the things you do. The only coach you have, especially when you're in that water, the only person talking to you is you, and that's a dangerous place for us.
Right.
That's a very if we're sitting there with your thoughts are just keep going, like just keep going, but. And I used to always joke for triathletes, if they really wanted to get a bigger audience to watch it and televise it, make swimming last.
Sorry.
It's all good. I got mine who hasn't jumped up to hearing that. I've actually separated mine so they don't do it. But yeah, so I wanted to ask that because I wanted to hear what people said about, is there transfers? Because if it was anybody else, if you didn't have the addiction, you decided one day you wanted to get into it, nobody would question it. You're just crazy Ben who's doing something, right?
Right.
So how did the long swim? So when you came out of the triathletes, you started doing long swims. How did you choose your first long swim? Like what sparked that to go? Okay, so I've done all this. Now I want to do this.
Well, it was a very gradual thing, from 1 mile to 2 miles to 3 mile swims. Mm-hmm. And then it was, okay, if I can do this, I'm going to go big, and I'm going to do a 12.5 mile swim. I did the Florida Keys Community College swim around Key West, and I chose that one because I talked to someone who said, listen, like, it sounds like a big deal and it sounds like everyone's so serious, but in the end, it's so relaxed. It's like the coolest swim ever.
Right.
It's awesome. And it's warm water. You don't have to worry about it. And it was also an opportunity for me to go down there with my twin brother, and he could kayak alongside me, and
right.
We could kind of do it together. And so I committed for that one, and it was actually not that bad. And I was like, okay, if I can do this, then why not go 20 miles and try and swim around the island that we live on in Rhode Island?
So you make it sound so easy. I think that's what people think about. Oh, I swam 12 miles. Most people don't. Most people swim the way you used to swim.
Yeah.
Right? Like, going across the pool for many is a challenge to do it properly. A 12.5 mile swim around the key that's a swim. Like, and then to add it, go to 20. If I could do 12, I could do 20. So you started. So how many of these did you do? Are these big before,
So I did Florida Keys, and then I did the 20 mile swim around Jamestown Island, and then as another training swim, I did the Florida Keys swim again.
Okay.
To set up for to be the first person to swim from Block Island, Rhode Island, all the way to Jamestown, which was all open water. And
Right.
there's the psychological piece of that one, because number one, you can't see any land when you leave Block Island. It's just you in the middle of the ocean. And number two, it's the sharkiest waters in New England, and some of the main breeding grounds for the great white shark. And I think it was end of July I did that swim, and the prime time for the breeding starts in August. So it's quite an endeavor. And I had that thought in my mind the whole time. And I even had a shark leash that had a battery pack on my ankle, and then about a meter long electric cord that would send out electric shocks every 6 seconds or so. And
Attached to you.
Yeah. And they're like, wow, that must really work, because you didn't get bit. And I was like, I don't care. Like, if someone had told me to put a pineapple on the end of a string and strap it to my leg, I would have done it if I thought that it would keep sharks away.
Right.
You know, it was more like convincing myself.
Yeah. So that adds a couple things. That adds drag to you a little bit.
Right. But it's actually it's pretty much like putting an ankle weight on.
Right.
So with your kick, it starts to.
Now,
and it also
was it shocking you at the same time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it shocks you right up the leg, and
every 6 seconds.
I actually didn't read about it much, or even try it out much before the swim, and then I put it on, and I realized that it really sent a shock around you, and a lot of people were saying, yeah, it's kind of reassuring to feel that shock every 6 seconds. I was like, I don't feel anything other than, like, that's annoying to feel that every 6 seconds.
And that was for 25 miles?
So that one was 19 miles. It was about a 10.5-hour swim.
Wow.
So,
even there, 10.5 hours. Like, people have a hard time, like, riding a bike, you know, for a certain amount, like an hour-long bike ride where they're actually riding their bike, like when they first start. 10.5 hours in the water with you, against the current, no water, no land to be seen, you know. And then you think back to where this all started, you know, that hospital bed, about to go to detox, like, all that happened prior to that, and then you're here. And I've always said this on the show, where we don't do anything small or simple, right? Addicts are always going to go find something big to do. Whether it's something just big in their community, or something big within their family, or something as big as where you've been going. So let's go from where you were, okay? Drinking as a teen, up through college, married life, all that, working, teaching, rehab, or hospital rehab, swimming, triathlons. Now what's happening? Because this is the best part of the whole story. On top of all of these other things, now it's like, okay, now something's happening even bigger.
right.
So that's, again, unimaginable, because, again, you think back to when we first started the conversation, to think that you would not be having a drink again ever was a thought that, like, oh my God, like, I would never think that I wouldn't ever have a drink again. The stuff that, like, when we got sober, when we were drinking and then got sober, that blew our minds. Like, I can't believe I didn't have a drink today. Or, I don't want to stop drinking because I can't. What do you mean I can't have a drink in 20 years? Like, there's that stuff. We didn't think about what was happening, what could happen. Not that it was ever thought of, but what could happen is now happening. So you've been doing the swims, now where are we? Because this is what really takes what we do to a whole other level.
Right. And there's no doubt that there is the addictive part of the swim, of the big swims, because for me, I also raise money for an organization, an environmental group called Clean Ocean Access, which cleans the water and makes sure that students understand kind of where their waste goes, and it composts, it recycles, all this cool stuff. And so I start a year out, and I start raising the money for my next swim, and that is my insurance for not backing out.
Right.
So, because I get 500 people backing me, and I put it out there, I'm doing this crazy swim. Like I can't back out of that.
Yeah, you got to do it.
In the same way that you have your sober network, right? And they hold you accountable. And for me, these swims parallel my journey in sobriety every single time I do it. And it gets to the point where it sucks so bad that like you want to quit. Mm-hmm. And as I go around and I make speeches to students and to adults, I ask people, have you found your physical wall? Have you found your psychological wall? Because we as alcoholics have, and in recovery. Yeah. And when I do these swims, I can take what I've learned and I can push through.
Right.
And it's been a crazy year and a half for me, because a year and a half ago I had Matt Corliss, who's the producer of my movie. He came to me and he said, I read about your crazy swims. I'd love to do a documentary about you. And he's worked on some very popular Netflix films and what have you. And I was like, okay, well, I think I'm kind of boring. Like, I have some good one-liners every now and then, but that's about it, And
because we do what we do, right? It's not. We don't see it as a big. It's. I personally, the things that are crazy, that are so out there, bigger than we would ever think of. It's just who we are now.
Right.
It's not to us. It's the norm. To other people, it's not the norm.
Right.
So, what we see as being mundane, other people are like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah. Yeah. And I said to him, I said, that's cool. Like, let's do it. And he came up and filmed me in Vermont before, what was it? So it was like at least 6 months before my swim from Providence to Jamestown, which was a 25-mile swim. And he said, this film is not a film about, it's not a sport film. It's not about you doing a crazy feat. This film is about recovery. And I was like, okay, you got me there. Yeah. Let's do it. If we can make this film about recovery, and luckily I've always been except for maybe my first year in sobriety, I was a little bit quiet about who I was and kind of hiding around the shadows as I learned how to be a normal member of society without having alcohol, which was, especially in social settings, was really difficult. But then it was like all out, and I said, I don't care. Like I told the students about my past so that they could learn from it, and parents and everybody who was around me, and they all know and and knew at the time. So it's not like it was a big jump for me to make a movie about my sobriety and really putting it out there.
That's amazing. It's, again, it just blows my mind that this happened. Number one, from this, like, the swimming was done to keep you busy and to challenge you and everything else you were doing, right? Something to do, and then for that to go into fundraising and hold accountability, which I find you're a couple of things. Accountability, number one, is a big one. That's why we have sponsors. That's why we have groups, and why we have a recovery community. And it all keeps coming back to community, right? The recovery community is a big one. Then you've got, holding yourself accountable one day at a time, right? So it's like, you got to do this. Like, it's amazing how all the lessons of, the 12 steps are really, they should just be printed up and handed out in grade 1. Like that, kind of just, these are the steps of life, consistency, do it. And then to go and have this documentary made where all of a sudden you're looking at things so differently, where it's about recovery. So talk about the movie. Talk about the movie here.
Sorry. So, as I said, with the film coming out, my twin brother was the catalyst behind this, and he too is in recovery, and I helped get him the help he needed during his most difficult time. And so he's just a little bit behind me by about maybe 4 or 5 years. And and so he was like, okay, like, this is what we're doing. He was totally focused, and he kept the movie on track. And when so much so that in the beginning, I was trying to raise like the first $5,000 to make the production of and the filming of the movie to pay Matt. He was like, okay, here's a check. Don't worry about it. We'll raise the money later. We're just going to do this. I was like, okay. Like, he believes in me that much. Let's do it.
Nice.
And so that was when it was full on for the film, and for the swim itself. And it became just a very built up thing, and everybody in Rhode Island knew about it. And they knew about this crazy guy in recovery who's doing this swim from Providence to Jamestown, which is full. It's all of Narragansett Bay, and no one's done it before. And he's raising money for this environmental group, and he's making a movie about alcoholism. Like, how cool is that?
Right.
I didn't realize that it would be as difficult as it was, because the other two, or all my swims, I just persevered, and yeah, it had some tough parts, but this was straight into the wind. It averaged about 9 miles per hour, and then it was straight into the current most of the way. And to put that in perspective, I average about 2.1 miles per hour when I swim. And there's 1 hour, a 1 hour section when I made it 145 yards.
Oh my goodness.
So I was barely moving.
Right.
And I knew that if I stopped moving, I'd go backwards.
Right.
And, if that doesn't say something about the message of your own sobriety,
right,
I don't know what does.
Yeah. And you weren't thinking that would have happened, but you're looking afterwards being like, this whole swim was recovery, was the journey of like, I'm going nowhere. Like, it's like, it's unreal. Now that your brother is also in recovery. Did you help him after the fact, once you became clean? And
yeah, so he called me from the Turks and Caicos having a panic attack and a major bloody nose, and I was like, Chris, been there, done that.
Right.
I booked you a ticket to JFK, and you're going to be going into the same place that I did, and you'll get just as much help as I did, and you're going to feel like $1 million coming out of there.
Wow.
And it stuck, and it was a positive experience. He wanted it, which is what we know. You have to want it to make it work, and he's. I think the film is helping him come out a little bit more about it.
Right.
about his own sobriety. He's not as outward as I am, but to each their own.
Yeah, everyone recovers in their own way, and I think that there are people like you and me who are just, we'll sing it from the rooftops, right? Even when I did, and I didn't talk about it for about 11 years at all. So when I did my sobriety, it was always, I'd go to a social setting and I'd order a ginger ale, but I'd always put it in the same glass that everybody else is drinking from.
Right.
You go to most places now, they serve the ginger ale in a different glass, like the kid's tall glass, right? I'm like...
with a cherry.
Right. I'm like, can I get the adult glass, please? And I would just sip it and, so nobody, always keep it topped up so nobody would top me up their own way. And now it's that you talk openly about it. I laugh where I worked for a company and, it was a fitness company and it was work hard, play harder. And I was always the last person to leave the party. Right, and I was the one who was the only one who remembered. Partially, I think it gave me dirt on everybody, but and I would turn around and somebody said to me, they go, "Do you not drink?" And I said, "No." And nobody wants to hear like, "Well, I'm an alcoholic." So they go, "Why don't you drink anymore? Why don't you drink?" I'm like, "Well, I used to drink it all, so now I just no more room." Right? There's always like some reasons, to make it. I don't want to ruin your party, but I'm going to tell you why I don't party. So when you start talking about, you became big about it, and you're just talking about it now, and you're talking about through the movie, how much of the movie do you think will resonate with people, not just in recovery or looking for sobriety? Because hopefully people will watch this who maybe know other people and be able to reach out to them or be a source for them to learn more. That's how, that's my biggest thing is how, I know when I went through sobriety, through recovery, there wasn't a lot out there, right? Like there is now and today, where my wife just go to an Al-Anon meeting. That was it.
Right.
There was and depending on who you are and what you're into, it's either Al-Anon either works for you or Al-Anon doesn't. And my wife was like, I don't know, it wasn't for her, right? So this is a great, is there a big message in there to people who maybe want to learn how to help or just understand a bit more about the addict's life and how they can help somebody, especially in family?
The best part of how the film has been done, and I would love to take responsibility for it, but I can't, because it's the way that the editor, Jen, and our producer, Matt, has kind of come across these ideas and has captured it in the interviews with friends and family. And it is such an all-encompassing message of support, of resilience, of rebirth, of self-understanding and self-respect. And, as I go about promoting the film and talking about the messages, I've learned so much about humanity. And it's not if someone is looking for like an intervention like show, it's not that. The one thing Matt and I did not want it to be was a Debbie Downer, just a drunkalogue about my whole experience of using, because that approach it didn't help me when I was young, because the people who came and talked about their own drunkalogues, it only made me want to drink.
Yeah.
And
I think that was my first 4 or 5 meetings. Just so you know, that was like. And finding a meeting to go to, you had to go around and find different what worked, and that's what I thought. I was like, oh my god, right? So,
but it also it has a great message about how you can be in recovery, and you can be excited about life, excited about who you are, and you can do crazy big things that you never would have been able to do while you were using and as an addict. And in this message, it's destigmatizing the idea that addicts are a bunch of, cigarette smoking bums on the side of a church who
Right.
it doesn't match because they don't see what happens inside those rooms, and they don't hear the magic and the stories that these people and the wisdom that comes out of them, and hopefully the wisdom that I can share, it's just me and it's one person, but it can inspire anyone to make the differences in their own lives to have a more productive existence.
I love that, because that's what, like you said, we're not our addiction. We're not what was, and that drunkalog is. We just don't want to. What's like? That's the purpose of us having a conversation. What's next? What else can come out of this? Great, you don't use anymore. You don't drink anymore. Now what? Now what? Right? And there's so much open. It literally is. Every New Year's Day, you always see the social media posts. Brand new chapter. Blank page. You walk out of recovery, in sobriety. That's a brand new book. For a new page, you get to write from scratch again. So being able to see the uplifting side of it, and the, like I said before, the craziness that has happened to people once they've overcome their addiction and reached that point of, I've got to do something different in my life. And we don't have to say it has to be massive. It doesn't have to be grand. But we've done the other side. Been there, done that. That kind of did its thing. Now I want to do this thing. So
Right.
That's amazing. So when does it come out?
So it'll kind of a soft opening probably in about 3 weeks. They're finishing up the music of the film right now, and writing the score and getting it all done, and a few changes here and there, and then in 3 weeks I'll just start hitting the road and going to some film festivals and doing talks with people who are coming out to watch the film, and answering questions about my experience and my outlook, and then the hopes are that the distribution to like a Netflix or an Amazon or an HBO will come from those festivals.
That's so, again, going back, I can't imagine not drinking. Filmmaker on the circuit, showing your film, like, that's, again, anything is possible. That's not just about people in recovery. It's anybody, right? You put the work in, be consistent. That's unbelievable. I love the story. I can't wait to see it. And I'm going to put a link to the trailer and everything else below. Let me ask you, after this is done, you've got this film, where do you see yourself going with this? Are you going to keep doing more? Are you going to try and, what's your next big swim? What's your next big, where are we going to be going from, like, Rhode Island and just swim up around the St. Lawrence, come back and stop in Mississauga? Like, what are we doing?
Right. And so there'll be another big swim in the probably next summer. This summer I just couldn't do it with the travel of the movie. I knew that was coming, and your body just needs a little bit of time. I mean, I'm still swimming like 13 to 15 miles a week, which is a pretty good amount, but my body's still recovering over time. And I did sign up for a race in Isle that's about a 10-mile race, open water, but it was just too much. I've always wanted to do it.
It's like about a 10-mile race. It's like, I'm just going to the corner store.
Well, yeah. I keep thinking about next steps, and my passion is helping people.
Right.
And my passion is education and helping young people. And, I'm the guy in the room who, there are a bunch of awkward teenagers in the corner like they don't know what they're doing there or why.
Right.
I'm the one that goes out and hangs out with them because I can relate to them and can help them figure out what's going on.
Right.
And at the same time, tell them you don't need to be sneaking drinks from the bar in order to be having a good time.
Exactly. Now you've got kids, right?
Yes, I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Okay. They obviously know all about your addiction, your recovery.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you go with that? So, because I got a lot of parents listen to this. I'm very open with our kids. My oldest one's in university, his first year. We know there's drinking. We know, because I think a lot of people say, like, in our house, or people come over, they say, well, should we bring a bottle of wine? Like, my wife will have a drink, sure. Like, I obviously don't, but she will have occasionally. How do you have that conversation with your kids? Have you had that conversation of what to look for? I don't want them to be fearful of alcohol. They got to know it runs in our family and how to protect themselves, but not to be one side or the other. So have you had that conversation?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's teaching them how to recognize what excess is.
Right.
Because it's such a relative term these days. And, as a high school teacher, talking to some of these kids about the parties they go to, and I was like, what's drinking too much? And they're like blacking out or throwing up. And I'm like, guys, like you all are like crazy talented athletes. Do you understand what you're doing to yourself?
Right.
And more than anything, when I talk to my kids, I talk to them as human beings. I don't talk to them as this is bad. This is, you're going to die. I don't talk to it in idle threats. I talk to them, if you do drink, you need to do it responsibly, and this is how you do it responsibly.
Right.
I never knew how to do that. I never was able to just have one drink. I don't think ever, unless I was interrupted, right? And at the same time, when they do make mistakes, it becomes an idea of your relationship with your own child.
Yeah.
And I am very disappointed in your actions because this is what you did. And it's not so much that you're hurting me, but you're hurting yourself.
Right.
And that makes me feel fearful. It makes me feel scared for you, and I don't want you going down this same path.
Right.
That is 100 times more effective than saying, you just went out, you got caught drinking at your buddy's house, you are not allowed to go out for 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah, that's, we've had those conversations. We also make it, the whole, if you need, there's always a phone. Text us, call us. We will pick you up. No questions asked in the car ride home. We'll have a conversation tomorrow. But it's that you're not going to get yelled at. You're not going to be punished. Just we'll come get you.
Right.
It's that very, very open conversation where we actually had last summer. We got a phone call from somebody else, from a parent saying, "Hey, my kid had a party, and your kid is one of the kids who we can't wake up."
Oh.
Right? We had to go pick him up, and it turns out it was somebody I knew in high school. I haven't seen since high school. That's the house it was at, and got him home, and hey, you're going to sleep upstairs. You're going to sleep here. Have some water. Took it through. I'm like, and we're going to be on top of you all night long and tomorrow. And that was a really big lesson for him. Not a negative. It was like, okay, I can't do this. That wasn't fun. I had the conversation with him. I said, I picked you up. Your clothes were soaking wet. They have a pool. But your phone was dry. So no one pushed you. Like, I go, what happened? He goes, I don't know. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the fact that that's called blackout.
Right.
But it gave a lot of conversation where when I was younger, that did happen. No idea. Nobody had that conversation with me. There was nothing there. And again, I think when you and I grew up, it was different. There weren't conversations about that. It was just hush hush. And if we did get home drunk, I wasn't telling my parents.
There's a lot of avoidance in the parenting, even today, I think.
Yeah.
Out of sight, out of mind. In the same way that a lot of schools prescribe to that as well. Like, oh, if they go out partying at a friend's house on the weekend, then we don't know about it. Like, oh, well, we won't have to think about it.
Say, one barks, they all bark. All right. So listen, but I really, last question. If there's any advice on top of everything we've gone through that you would give somebody now who is thinking about going into recovery, what would you tell them?
You know, my advice for that would be, if you think you need to go in recovery, you need to go into recovery. And as we learn, those of us who have spent a lot of time in the rooms, this disease keeps doing push-ups, and it keeps getting stronger, and it keeps it just gets worse as you progress. You know, the earlier that you can be proactive and do something about it, then the better off you're going to be. And in the end, it's not something to be afraid of. Being sober, it's something to celebrate and be happy about, because you can do some really crazy, awesome things in sobriety that there's no way you could do when you were drinking.
Amazing. Man, I love that. We're going to end it right there, because there are some amazing things people can do that we just can't do, like you said, while we're drinking. So, Ben, thank you so much. All the information about the movie, if you have a link, please send it to me afterwards as well, to donate to your cause, please. The more we can save, the better. The more we can get clean water, the better. Again, I thank you so much for doing this. I'm looking forward to seeing the movie when it comes out. We're having a viewing party in my house. So I want to thank you. And Ben, honestly, this was amazing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. This is Matt Taub with Rise Up. My amazing guest, Ben Tuff, today. I will speak to you all next week. Have a great day and enjoy.
You're listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal with Matthew Taub.